Yeah, thanks. Welcome to this special concurrent section on industry. So we will have three presentations. So as we have 2 hours, I think we can have like 40 minutes for each presentation. So let's say 20, 30 minutes by presentation and 10 minutes Q&A. And if you want to have questions during your session as you want. So we will be hearing Sherzod Akhundjanov from Utah State University with the first paper called Industry Compliance Cost under the Renewable Fuel Standard, Evidence from Compliance Credits. Then we will have a session for 2 papers focused on hydrogen and oxygen. First one will be from Lennard Rekker from University of Groningen with a paper called Economic Conditions from Hydrogen Markets, Scenario Analysis. And we will finish by the paper of Gaetano Squadrito from Institute of Advanced Energy Technologies with a paper called Oxygen from Electrolysis for Medical Use, an economically feasible route. So, Sherzod, you're the first to talk. I let you the floor.
All right. Thank you, Quentin. Go ahead and share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so I want to go ahead and talk about this paper. I've written my Arthur Wardle.
So I'm sorry, Sherzod, but it seems to be an echo. I don't know if it's only from my side.
Excuse me?
I can hear it.
I have trouble to hear you.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it seems there is an echo, but I don't know if it's only my side.
There is an echo at the end of the sentence, yes. If you want, you can put like headphones. In general, it saves the situation. Or we can try another time also. We can try again to see.
Second. How about now? Do you still hear a static?
This is better, I think.
Yeah,
it's better. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead then.
All right. So, so this is a paper that looks into the effect of the FS, which is a form of environmental regulation here in the US, on obligated.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but it's not better actually.
Oh, sorry. Oh boy.
I don't know. Do you have headphones or something like that?
Yeah. To go and check it out. Yeah, I don't have here. I mean, I have built-in.
I mean, what I can propose is that you go second, and you get time to find your headphones. I think maybe it will be nicer.
Yeah, that will be nice.
Come quickly.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so sorry for this technical problem. Maybe we can. So I don't know. Maybe Lennard, would you agree to go?
Yeah, okay. I will start right now then. Okay.
Thank you.
Let's see.
I see your screen.
And do you see it enlarged right now?
Yeah, perfect.
Yes.
Fine. So hello, welcome everyone to my presentation. I'm a second year. This is a project of my first year in my PhD, but I'm in my second year right now. From the University of Groningen, and this project is called the Economic Feasibility of Hydrogen Production under Stringent Climate Policy, a quantile regression on Dutch power prices. The co-authors are Machiel Mulder. You might know this name from the Groningen conference, I think 3 years ago. He was the organizer, and Kezina is also a co-author of mine. So we of course know that many countries, in order to commit with the Paris Agreement of 2015, are searching for ways to decarbonize their energy systems by looking into electrification, biofuels, but also on hydrogen. So also in the Dutch climate agreement and the hydrogen strategy of the Dutch government, a particular focus has been put on green hydrogen. So this is renewably sourced hydrogen made by electrolysis, and that's made green by using green certificates. In order to promote the capacity expansion of electrolyzers without having to resort to subsidies and encourage like private investment increasingly, we need more favorable market conditions, since the electrolyzer capex is quite high. So we need many hours with low electricity prices in order to facilitate investment. So this is where this study comes in. We are looking at the economic conditions of electrolytic hydrogen production by answering the question, what are the economic factors behind day-ahead electricity prices in the Dutch power market? And more specifically here, we look into the question, how does the price duration curve change when different market fundamentals change? So this is an empirical study. We will be estimating in the first step a quantum regression model using historical data that's on an hourly basis for 2015 and 2019. Then the second step, we will be predicting the price duration curve and perform sensitivity and scenario analyses. And from these scenario analyses, we'll use the different price distribution we get from this scenario analyses to calculate hydrogen break-even prices. I'm
sorry, Lennard. Could
yes?
you define what is the price duration curve?
And this will be my next slide. I will go into it. Okay. So the price duration curve, I will schedule it right now. So the price duration curve ranks the electricity prices from low to high. You may notice from the low duration curve, that's actually the mirror image of this one, but for this graph, it is convenient to shape it in this way. So for every hour in the year, so 8,760 trading hours, we will have one price. And when we rank these prices, we will get the price duration curve. For an operator of an electrolyzer system that follows a minimal price strategy, that is, you can choose whenever you want to produce hydrogen. This operator then has a given capture price. So this is the average price up to a certain number of operating hours that he can realize for his operations in a given year. From this, and also using the other inputs like capital expenditure, operational expenditure, and electrolyzer efficiency, we can calculate hydrogen break-even cost. We're particularly interested into the the minimal point that can be achieved. So so what number of operating hours coincide with that, and what is the capture price? And in this way, we can derive the hydrogen break-even cost. Or actually, it's the other way around. We look at the hydrogen break-even cost, and the point at which it's minimized. There we can see how many operating hours this electrolyzer system has and what the capture price is. And this minimal cost we can compare with the alternatives in the market, such as electricity or biofuels or gas and oil.
I'm sorry, Lennard. Now, if I get it right, this price duration curve tells that you operate more when the electricity price is high? Or it's the reverse?
Yeah, this would say you would operate less when the extremes are more like going in the positive direction, because you do not want to produce when the electricity price is high. So you want to make use of low electricity prices.
Okay.
And you can say, because we're talking about like the PEM electrolyzers, they can switch on and off when they can respond quite fast to the changes in the market environment.
Okay.
So you want to make use of the low price environment in order to reach minimal break-even cost, in order to profitably produce hydrogen. So what this study is investigating is what happens when the price duration curve changes. So when we change certain market fundamentals, how does the price duration curve shift? And this again changes the hydrogen break-even price. So this movement is quite intuitive, of course. You see a downward movement because the electricity prices go or decrease. Then the economic model, I will go quite fast through this. This is a reduced form model. And the most important factors in the Dutch market are the prices for energy commodities such as natural gas, coal, and carbon permits, but also electricity demand, renewable energy generation from wind and solar, and cross-border effects such as those coming from Germany, our neighbor. So when the load or the RES changes in Germany, this impacts the price in the Netherlands. But also capacity unavailability, such as plant outages or maintenance at a given moment. So yeah, the benefit of quantile regression, our method, is that we can explain each part of the price duration curve by our explanatory variables. And maybe the figure below is maybe helpful for you. So here again is the price duration curve, and we divide our electricity prices in certain quantiles, and we're particularly interested into the extremes of the quantile regression. So we're employing different quantiles that are stated below. So starting from 1% and going to 99%. And here we state our model, and maybe particularly of interest is that we also control for moments of congestion between the Netherlands and Germany by including dummy and interaction variables. So then again, we're using hourly observations from the period 2015 to 2019. Now results. So I'll point here to the gas price. It's also quite intuitive that the marginal effect is increasing over the quantiles, because natural gas technologies in the Netherlands are almost always the price setting technology, and that is often happening in the upper quantiles of the electricity price distribution. Also during congestion, we almost always see high electricity prices in the upper quantiles. So when we find congestion in the upper quantiles, this more heavily impacts the electricity price. So maybe also of note is the positive effect from Germany of the load. Let's take, for example, quantile 1. We find a positive effect of 0.66. This effect is decreasing when we have congestion, and this is, of course, logically, as the load cannot affect the Dutch electricity price when we have congestion. So the marginal effect is decreasing in these moments. These are the graphed results from the previous table. Again, the same story. In the upper quantiles, the natural gas price is more heavily affecting the Dutch electricity price, and this also holds for the load forecast in the Netherlands. We can also see that the coal price is typical base load technology that is not affecting the upper quantiles that much. The horizontal curve, by the way, is are the OLS estimates, and the confidence intervals are given by the gray line. So when these are outside of the OLS estimate, we can say that the quantile estimate is significant. Now, how do we apply the results? This is particularly of importance when we want to link the conclusions from the electricity market towards the hydrogen market. We use the coefficient estimates of the QR model and use the actual 2019 data for the regressors and the electricity prices in order to predict the price duration curve, depending on the quantile of the actual electricity price in 2019. So, for example, when the electricity price in 2019 is in the first quantile, then we use the first quantile estimates in order to predict the price duration curve. What we then get is the figure below with a slight over prediction in the upper quantiles and a under prediction in the lower quantiles. We take this for granted. Nothing to say about this.
And Lennard, you don't have negative price?
What did you say?
You don't have a negative electricity price in this case?
No, okay. Not in 2019 at least.
Ah, okay.
And this is also not reflecting in the prediction. But in our scenario analyses, we find we get to negative electricity prices.
Okay, get it.
So by changing one of the regressors, we so this is the second part of the application is that we perform sensitivity and scenario analyses, and I'm not going to explain the details about this, but we get different electricity price distributions, and we use these distributions or price duration curves to calculate the hydrogen break-even cost in these different scenarios. You can see here, I don't know if you see my mouse, but this is the capture price of the operator of the electrolyzer in a given scenario. Then again, almost repeating the same story as in the tables and in the graphed results. So when we change one of the regressors, here we double each variable, then we see the following changes. So for the load forecast and the gas price, for example, this doubling mostly reflects in the upper quantiles. Then we define our scenario analysis by changing the load, renewable energy generation, and the carbon price. So both for the Netherlands and for Germany, with a given factor that's based on reports in the Netherlands and but also on the International Energy Agency. That's abbreviated in the wrong way. I see here, IAEE. Okay. Then for the so we have three different scenarios: so the modest, intermediate, and the stringent climate policy. And this reflects in different curves, so to say. So that we have in the stringent climate policy big shift upwards due to electrification, but also due to a higher carbon price. It may be also a result of the fact that the Dutch generation portfolio still uses a lot of coal in the baseload and natural gas in the as a peak in the peak load. So yeah, so the benefit of quantum regression is that it better reflects, as we think, the more extreme, so that duration curves can rotate more instead of just shifting with the mean to mean effect. So given certain assumptions on the electrolyzer, so different types of electrolyzers, alkaline electrolysis and PEM electrolysis, we calculate the hydrogen break-even costs under different scenarios, and conclude that with stringent climate policy we find a higher hydrogen break-even cost. This is of course logical because we see that electricity price increase strongly when we make the assumptions on electrification and increasing RES and carbon prices. So now, sort of a wrap up of this study. So we first set out to understand the driving factors and dynamics behind the price duration curve by using quantum regression. We use the quantum regression parameters to obtain different scenarios for the electricity price distributions. And we use the price distributions in each scenario to find break-even prices of hydrogen. More or less, we can conclude that stringent climate policy results in more volatile and, on average, higher prices, as you can see here, both in the negative and in the positive, but also on average. And this does not favor green hydrogen production, as we see that the minimal break-even price is increasing. This leads us to conclude there is a friction between the more general climate policy versus the policies that solely focus on promoting hydrogen. So this is it. So I'm open to any questions about the study.
Thank you, Lennard. Very interesting presentation. So I'm going to take question from the audience now. So you can ask question by raising your hand or in the chat as you want. So if there is none yet, I would have a question. So I think your two responses were really interesting. So I have a first question, which is about volatility. So I'm not sure I have understood how volatility is integrated in your quantile regression. So
you mean a reduced form model?
Yeah.
We do not use like volatility.
Okay, but do you
variable,
think that? Okay, because I was thinking.
I've seen it in different studies. Also in electricity price models that they make use of electricity volatility variables.
Okay.
In their model, but here I just conclude. So I was mentioning volatility because I see here that the extremes of the electricity price are getting, or the electricity price is getting more extreme in the stringent climate policy.
Yeah, I mean, but this is only one aspect of volatility, right? Because I was wondering, I have to say, I do not know a lot about the technical of electrolysis. I was thinking, is it a very flexible process? I mean, because I was thinking about intraday volatility. Is it something that you can adjust more or less easily? Yeah,
so that's the case with especially PEM electrolysis. That also what the techno-economic literature writes about a lot. That it can adjust quite quickly to changing market conditions.
Okay.
So make use of the very low electricity prices and not operating when the price is high.
Okay, well, okay, that's cool. That prevents some problems, I guess. I have a question from Gaetano Squadrito. Gaetano, feel free to open your mic if you want to ask it right away.
Okay, yeah, yes, okay. I just have some question about the relative cost of hydrogen, because the slide moved the continuously, so I don't understand exactly what is the expectation about the relative cost of hydrogen from this simulation.
Do you mean the calculation of the levelized cost of hydrogen?
Yes, but the results, what is the, after your calculation, what is the range of the variability about the relative cost of hydrogen that you expect? Your calculation.
So you're asking how we calculate the levelized cost of hydrogen?
Yeah.
So yeah, in the below formula, we state how we, because of course we have an annual price duration curve, and an electrolyzer has a lifetime of 20 years. We say we take the net present value over those 20 years, and we also take an annuity factor, so that we get like equivalent annual cost. So the fixed costs are equivalent annual cost over those, and we're assuming that the electrolyzer operates for 20 years. Of course, you can say this is in terms of operating hours, but we abstain from that. So we say we take 20 years, no matter how many operating hours the electrolyzer is running, because when you speak of calculating break-even cost over 20 years, you say 20 years in operating hours, but yeah, this is quite a different. This is then a different way in how we calculate the equivalent annual cost.
Okay, thank you. I understand. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, is there another question from the audience? No. Lennard, I have a last question. I would like you to come back on your final sentence, which was that you would say that climate policy and hydrogen support policy are not may not exactly be in the same direction. So, could you elaborate more on that?
Yeah. So I would say that the policies favoring electrification, but also favoring higher carbon prices, are not favorable to like green hydrogen production, because we see that the electricity price duration curve is shifting upwards, and this is of course because of the composition of the Dutch generation mix that still consists of a lot of natural gas technologies and coal technologies up to 2030. Then of course the critique is, yeah, the model is static, and what would happen after 2030 when we only have renewables? Then again, investors would only invest into wind and solar technologies when they can find enough periods with high enough prices in the market so they can recoup their investment. And this will only be the case when natural gas technologies set the system marginal price in a lot of periods during the year. So I would think that natural gas technologies will be part of the electricity system for a long time still. So this is where our conclusion comes from.
Yeah, sure. I mean, if I get it right, you're saying that climate policies are favoring electrification and favoring renewable, which raise electricity price, which increase the cost of clean hydrogen.
Yeah, yeah. So
Okay.
policies
And-
favoring just renewable energy, such as wind and solar, would be more beneficial to green hydrogen production than policies favoring a higher carbon price or electrification.
Okay, but I mean, because if you have a higher, I think this is really interesting because this is not, that's straightforward, because you could think that a higher carbon price, it decreases the differential of cost between black hydrogen and green hydrogen, and between carbon technologies and fossil fuel technologies and hydrogen technologies.
So you can argue that like gray hydrogen production using SMR technologies, I don't know if you use to that terminology, using natural gas, but they also have to buy carbon emission permits in order to produce. You would say when we increase the carbon price, this would not favor gray hydrogen production, and this would favor green hydrogen production. But a higher carbon price also has an effect on the electricity price. That increases the entire electricity price distribution. So this also has a decreasing effect on green hydrogen production.
I think it's really interesting because I mean, from my point of view, it brings back this debate of what should you decarbonize first? Is it upstream, the upstream side or the downstream side, or at least how do you make your arbitrage between different kind of supports and things like that? So I think this research brings a new element, very interesting for that.
Yeah, indeed. So I think that so green hydrogen producers should focus on the more premium markets, so to say, where they can earn a lot of, where the alternatives are very costly, and where they can earn a profit first, and not first focus on the downstream market. That would be, I guess, transport or residential heating, for example. More the premium markets, where it's where alternatives are less available.
Okay. So, okay, thank you, Lennard. I think if we don't have any more questions, we can move forward to the next presentation. So thank you all again, Lennard, and congratulations for your really nice study.
Great.
So, Sherzod, have you fixed your headphone problems?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, I think it's nice.
All right.
So,
1 second. Can you see my screen?
I do.
All right, so I want to talk about this research paper where we look at the.
And please, could you put it in full screen?
Which one?
Could you put your presentation in full screen?
Second. Better?
No, actually, I see a black screen. Okay, maybe okay. This is fine. You can. Okay, yeah, perfect. Okay, thanks, and sorry for disturbing you.
So what we do in this study essentially is we look into the effect of renewable fuel standard here in the US on industry performance, and specifically industry profits. So just to give you a little bit of background about the renewable fuel standard. So the renewable fuel standard is environmental policy created under the Energy Policy Act of 2005 and later expanded under Energy Independence and Security Act of 2007. essentially Congress created the Renewable Fuel Standards Program to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and expand renewable fuel sector here in the States. Now, the statute itself essentially includes volumetric mandates for various types of transportation fuels, like cellulosic-based, biomass-based, and so forth. And the RINs are created by biorefineries who generate them whenever they produce a gallon of biofuel, and then the RIN is can be traded following, allowing the obligated parties to comply with the RFS mandates, by either blending them themselves. So essentially, the oil refineries, in order to comply with the regulation, they can go ahead, acquire biofuel from biorefineries and mix them in transportation fuel. That's the one way to kind of adhere with the regulations. Or the second is, if they don't have any capacity, if they have the capacity to produce their own biofuels, what they can do is they can blend their own biofuels into the transportation fuel. Okay, now this is going to be important down the line because as we will see shortly, a lot of integrated refineries, in other words, refineries that own both oil refinery and their biorefineries or blending stations, they can actually have some advantage over merchant refineries who don't own their own biorefineries. And oftentimes merchant refineries, they have to go ahead and buy these RINs, which allow them to comply with the RFS regulation. Right now, now under the renewable fuel standard, the oil refineries can mix different kinds of biofuels in order to comply with the regulation. And this scheme here illustrates the hierarchy of these different RIN systems. So here, what we see essentially is, we see a nested structure. So we have D6 at the lowest level, and then we have D5, D4 at the upper level. Now, if you blend higher level biofuels like D4 and D3 and D7, this naturally meets the mandate imposed by the RFS, but those RINs are relatively more expensive. So a lot of times what we see in the industry is firms go with D6 RINs, which are relatively cheaper. Now, just to kind of comment on this RINs a little bit more, these RINs, for instance, D6 comes from corn ethanol. They generate D6 RINs, which firms can buy, and oftentimes it serves to fulfill only the the lowest level of the mandate. Okay, now blending corn ethanol is generally cheaper than blending any other biofuel we see here. So oil refineries tend to use D6 RINs to comply with as much of the mandate as possible in the industry. Okay, now the ethanol from more advanced sources such as sugarcane, which makes up the D5 RIN here, generates D5 RINs, and it constitutes a smaller and as you can see, a nested mandate here. Okay, and RINs from biomass-based diesel and cellulosic fuels, they fulfill the mandate in their own categories and oftentimes constitute a smaller share. Okay, now given this, given the cost of these different biofuels, we often see a price hierarchy for these different types of RINs, as we show at the bottom here. So these 6 RINs tend to be cheaper compared to others. And as a result, the industry, the oil refineries tend to buy as much D6 RINs as possible. And then D5 is relatively more expensive. And then D4, D3, and D7 are the most expensive. Okay. Now, this is a binding in that this relationship is holds over time and observed in the industry. Now, coming back to our research question, so our main research question is the impact of the RFS program itself on the industry, and specifically on the obligated industry, oil refineries. Now, there are several papers or existing studies who look into the effects of renewable fuel standards on commodity prices, on the profits of the biorefineries and so forth. So we have a couple of these studies here. Now, most of these studies, when they analyze the effect of RFS on industry, they try to focus on the cost pass-through. In other words, whether obligated parties were able to pass the cost of compliance onto consumers, but they never made an effort to go ahead and see whether the regulation itself had any financial impacts on the firms, like in terms of the stock prices, the procurement costs and so forth. So this is essentially comes to the to our research question, specifically if the whether the compliance cost of the regulation is zero for the U.S. refineries, even so they are able to pass through the cost of compliance to the consumers. It doesn't mean that the regulation is having no effect on firms' other financials, specifically the stock market prices, and that's something we're going to be exploring here. All right, specifically, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at the heterogeneous effect of RFS on industry profits. We go ahead and split oil refineries based on their market capitalization into three groups: big oil refineries, medium, and small. And for each of these firms, we're going to be analyzing the effect of the regulation on their financials. All right. Now, the thing is, if we look at the industry reports, like in terms of the anecdotal evidence of the impact of RFS on industry profits, we observe some interesting observations. Specifically, what often comes up is that some stakeholders in the RFS debates, they express concerns that larger refineries, they've used the RFS to disadvantage smaller ones. Okay, and so we can broadly categorize the oil refineries into two groups: merchant refineries and integrated refineries. We can actually show this over here in this picture. So again, this scheme illustrates how the process works. So we have the biofuel. Biofuel coming on the left-hand side, and we have the oil extraction on the left-hand side, and the oil refinery is the obligated party on the RFS, right? So now, in order to comply with the regulation, oil refinery should blend biofuel with the transportation fuel, and that happens at the fuel blender, right? Now, merchant refiners, as I said, they are relatively smaller refiners, and they don't own their own fuel blender. Okay, they are relatively small, so that they oftentimes they have to buy RINs on the market, like any other like pollution permits. Now, the integrated refiners, on the other hand, they are relatively large. They are big oil companies, and oftentimes they own their own fuel blender. Okay, in other words, they're going to be creating their own RINs, compliance credits. Okay, which means when they are producing large volume of transportation fuel, they can hoard large number of RINs, and thereby they can affect the prices of the RINs on the market. Okay, and sometimes what we also observe is with integrated refineries, they not only own their own fuel blender, they sometimes own their own biorefinery as well. Okay, and so this creates some discourse in the industry. Specifically, the merchant refineries often claim that the integrated refiners, they disadvantage smaller ones. Now, again, this is understandable because of the price effect, given that integrated refiners can affect RIN prices. But at the same time, we see an opposite discourse. Specifically, the integrated refiners often claim that the smaller refineries, like merchant refineries, they are protected under small refinery exemption program, which I mentioned over here. So this program here was implemented by Congress in order to shield, the refineries undergoing some economic or financial hardships. So oftentimes merchant refineries are benefited by this program, and so the integrated refiners claim that this program is actually helping smaller refineries who don't own their fuel blender to take advantage of the system. Right. So in other words, the RIN system really doesn't impact the smaller ones. Right. So now we have this essentially two opposing kind of views, right? The integrated refiners claim that the small ones are protected, are shielded under SRE system, whereas small refiners claim that the larger refineries are manipulating or affecting the RIN prices, okay, potentially. Now, to answer this question, we go ahead and again, as I said, look into the oil refineries of different sizes. Now, in this data, we focus on the RIN system in 2015. Just to quickly comment on this, when Congress passed the law back in 2005 and 2007, Congress intentionally set the mandate, the volumetric mandate, high, and again, it didn't mean that that was binding at the time. Okay, to prevent undue financial pressure on the transportation fuel industry, Congress explicitly allowed the EPA to review the volumetric standards, every year and adjust them so that the oil refiners can follow the regulation and also see no harm for their business. Okay, now given that the EPA makes two announcements every year in regards to the mandate, like the amount of biofuel that needs to be mixed. The first EPA proposes the proposed rule, okay, and it's not going to be binding. So when EPA issues a proposed rule, the goal there is to gather public and industry comments on the proposal, like whether that new requirement is favorable to the industry or not. Okay, and once it collects all of these perspectives and views, it goes back and makes a final decision, oftentimes before November 30th. Okay, so we see this happening here, or getting reflected in the RIN prices here. So we have three different types of RINs we're going to be focusing on in this study: D6, which is corn, and then D5, sugarcane, and D4. And we have two event dates here. The first one is the proposed rule, where the EPA makes a proposal, and then the November 30th is the final rule on the mandate. And we can see that around that time we observe a clear kind of activity, particularly after November 30th, that the markets adjust for RIN prices. And so our goal here is to exploit the variations in the RIN prices, specifically the variations induced by the announcement of these regulations, okay, of volumetric mandates, in order to identify the effect of the RFS on industry stock prices. Right now, again, for our data, we pull D6, D5, and D4 RINs from the oil price information system. In addition to that, we go ahead and gather information on 12 publicly traded refining companies. We couldn't get the data for all of the refining companies because for private companies, that information is confidential, so we cannot access that. So for these 12 publicly traded companies, these are the companies whose annual production is 200,000 gallons. Sorry. And we categorize these firms based on their market capitalization, following Pharma and French. So companies with greater than 100 billion include BP, Chevron, Exxon, Shell, and Total. So these are the large companies, and these companies, as I talked earlier, they own their own fuel blender, and oftentimes they also have their own biorefineries as well. Okay, and then we have the medium firms whose market capitalization is between 10 to 100 billion, and then the small ones whose capitalization is less than 10 billion. Now, in addition to these variables, we also include the energy market data, like the oil prices, so forth, in our econometric modeling. Now, the first order of business is we go ahead and identify the stationarity of this series, because for our empirical strategy, both series need to be stationary. So we have the standard ADF and KPSS tests reported here. But the issue with these tests, again, these tests are often reported by the studies I mentioned earlier, but the drawback of this test is that they don't take into account the structural break in the RFS we have seen over here. So we clearly see a break around these two dates. And so it's well known that in the presence of structural breaks, the standard stationarity tests tend to produce conclusions in favor of non-stationarity. So as a result, we combine these two tests with the Lee and Szerződich stationarity test, which takes into account multiple endogenously determined structural breaks. All right, and again, all of these tests indicate that the series is non-stationary, so we apply the first differencing wherever relevant. Okay. Now, in terms of the econometric methods, we take two approaches. Our first approach is time series analysis. Now, with time series analysis, we just explore the association between these two series. We don't make any causal statements here. Our idea here is to see the feedback relationship between the RIN markets and then the financial or the stocks of the individual companies. And then in our second empirical strategy, we go towards causal analysis, where we implement event set analysis to identify the effect of the RFS on stock prices. All right. So first of all, for the time series analysis, before performing the analysis, we perform the Johansson's co-integration test in order to identify whether we have to be using VAR or vector error correction model. And from here, we can see that most of the series are not co-integrated, so except a couple of them here. So we adopt a VAR for our main workforce model, but we also apply BCM model for this couple of these firms, and we obtain virtually identical results. So here's our VAR model that we're going to be exploring. The first equation is for firm stock prices, so we have information here, and then the second equation is for RIN, and we include the lags of the firms and the RINs in this equation, and we determine the M based on the BIC. Now, this is the baseline equation. We enrich this model with additional controls like the energy market prices, the crude oil prices, and so forth. All right, so here's the first table. So what we observe here is this, again, the coefficients of the lag orders from the first equation, because this is the main equation. We're trying to identify the association between the RINs and firms. So we report the lags here of the D6 RIN, okay, on stock prices of individual companies here. And what we observe is for large companies, okay, like Exxon, BP, and Shell, we observe negative association between the RIN prices and the stock prices between days 3 and 4. So, however, for other firms like small refineries or medium refineries, we don't observe any statistically significant effect. So this is important because only the large firms, right, Exxon, BP, and Shell, are they seem to be affected by the, they seem to have negative relationship with the RIN prices. And then we go to the D5 RIN. This is for sugar, biofuel from sugar cane. Again, we observe a similar story here. We see that only the large refineries, Exxon, Chevron, BP, Shell, and Total, have negative associations with the RIN prices, again, in days 4 and 5. And for D4, again, remember, as we go from D6 to D4, we're now going from the cheaper to more expensive RINs. So it's kind of natural to see the effect kind of diminish, because most of the firms, they try to exploit D6 to kind of satisfy their mandate. And for with D4, the effect kind of diminishes. But again, regardless, we observe negative association with stock prices of large firms and the RIN prices here. Okay. We also go ahead and perform impulse response function, and we observe that a negative a shock in the RIN prices gets percolated into the large firms, large refineries' stock prices. So we observe a negative effect in days 4 for both large refineries. But for small refineries, again, these are just a couple of examples. In the paper, we provide a more complete example. For smaller and medium firms, the effect is non-significant. Right now, so essentially, our time series analysis shows that there is a negative association between the RIN markets and large firms' stock prices, and the effect often is realized in lags 3, 4, and 5. Again, it doesn't imply anything in terms of causal interpretation. So we move ahead to our second empirical strategy. So here we, as we mentioned, implement event study method. We essentially go ahead and take advantage of the shocks created by these announcements in order to implement the event study analysis. Now, these shocks are plausibly exogenous because EPA makes those announcements after reviewing the last year's mandate and also the original law, and makes unexpected or unannounced it makes the announcement based on that. Now, the main method we're going to be implementing comes from Late and et al. From the AJA paper, where authors again look into the effect of the RINs on the biorefineries. So they don't look at the on the oil refineries profits. They look at the biorefineries. So we adopt a similar approach. So in this model, so Y is our stock price. Again, we take the first differencing of that. We include the polynomial controls for time, and then we include the time dummies. So capital T stands for the first event over here, and also the second event. And we also allow a lag of these events. Okay, so we introduce essentially 2 dummies, and then we allow a window around those shocks. And in addition, we also include controls XT. So here in XT, we include the oil prices, a normal rate of return. Again, this is approximated by the Russell 3000 index. And in addition, we also include the months of year and day of week mixed effects to control for unobservable effects inherent to the individual periods. Right. So here are the estimation results from that model. So what's happening here is, again, we perform the analysis based on firm size, and for medium firms and small firms, we don't observe any effect. However, for large firms, after the final roll, we observe a statistically significant effect. And again, it happens in lags 4 and 5. So this is in line with what we have seen with our time series analysis. And so this actually corroborates our earlier analysis. But again, the advantage of this setup is we are now performing a causal analysis in this setup. can just kind of skip that. So the main conclusion of this study is that the RFS tends to have a negative effect on large refineries' stock prices, whereas small and medium firms are not significantly affected. Now, this is a piece of information that was absent in the existing literature because, again, most of the current studies, they focus on the pass-through, whether firms were able to pass, the entire cost of compliance onto consumers. But again, as we mentioned, that doesn't take into account all the financial impacts of the regulation, and we show that indeed the effect is significant for large refineries. And now this brings to that discourse we mentioned earlier, the claim that the claim of large refineries that small or merchant refineries are unaffected by regulation because of the small refinery exemption program seems to have a valid ground. This program seems to be protecting the small and medium refineries, as we have seen, observing a significant effect, whereas large refineries seem to be affected by this policy. Right. This is
okay. Well, thank you very much, Sherzod. Very interesting presentation. Is there any question from the audience? So if there is none, I was wondering something, which is more in terms of the storyline of your paper, which is, do you think that these results could be interpreted in terms of stranded assets, which is a kind of, which has been a very fashionable, topic right now.
Can you repeat that again, please? I didn't
Okay.
catch the last part.
Do you hear me?
Yeah, now better.
I mean, I think that these results, have similar implication in the discussion about stranded assets.
Stranded assets, yeah.
I mean, what do you think about that? Maybe it could be an interesting, way of selling this paper. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, when we looked at the firm's financials, we didn't really distinguish between the type of assets that the firms may have. But when we try to justify, why large firms may still have, may still experience this negative effect. I mean, I mentioned this somewhere at the beginning. Essentially, our main kind of argument was that the negative effect may be coming from, the profit margins of these oil refiners, because if you think about this, before the regulations, these companies were selling a lot of transportation fuel without blending it, right, with biofuel. So, but with the regulation, we suppose that the regulation is curtailing the original production. So in other words, the companies aren't able to kind of sell the same amount of oil as before, fuel products as before, and so that may be translating into kind of negative effect. Now the second one is the cost of a biofuel procurement. So as I mentioned, even so some of these large refineries own their fuel blender, not all of them own their biorefinery. So in other words, in order to comply with the regulation, they have to actually acquire the biofuel from the biorefineries. So there is some costs involved in that regard, like the negotiations, the setting up the infrastructure for the process to work. And so those costs obviously are going to be reflected in the firm's financials. And whether they're going to be reflected in the stranded assets or the company's other assets, this is again something we did not kind of pin down in this paper, but I think it can be interesting extension.
Okay.
Again, the main problem again, coming back, the main problem with for us in terms of the data collection was a lot of these companies don't make their financial information publicly available, so you cannot really kind of break down their financial holdings by asset type, and that's why we were limited to just focus on publicly traded companies. But again, with publicly traded companies, you can have so much. There is not like a lot of detailed information. I mean, we went to the company's annual stakeholder reports. And again, those reports, they try to provide the bare minimum oftentimes. So that was the limitation we had.
And do you think that, there may be different behaviors on the stock market, whether it is buying buyers of stocks for large firms and small firms? I mean, maybe, shareholders are just more informed with large firms, no?
I mean, in our model, we do, I mean, again, going back to our event set analysis, right?
Okay.
So we, in this specification, the X, again, includes several variables. So one of them is the normal rate of return, like, what's happening on the market, based on the, the S&P 500 index and other major indices. So this is effectively capturing the kind of the normal rate of return experienced by other companies, not necessarily oil companies, but also we have the oil prices here as well, right? So if there is any change in the demand for oil, whether it's large or small, so that should be reflected in the oil prices, right? WTI or Texas and so forth. So I think that would be captured by X in that regard, whereas the estimates on this time dummy, I mean, which stands for the the shock days, I think that would still be unconfounded in this case.
Okay. Okay, interesting. I have a last question, but sure, there is none from the audience. Please raise your hand. So maybe this last is maybe even more out of the box of my previous question. Would be: do you think that RPS have created incentives to change the specialization of refineries? I mean,
that's a good question. Yeah. This was something we were actually working on. The thing is, when RFS was passed in 2005 and 2007, I mean, there were already some companies who owned their, oil refineries and fuel blender, and some of them had biorefineries. But biorefinery was like up and coming industry. It wasn't big back then, and so these early companies who owned their own biorefineries or oil refineries, they had like a first mover advantage after the policy kind of kicked in. This is for sure. But then what we observed after 2005 and 2007 is that a lot of these large companies, they started to acquire, right, this fuel, downstream fuel blenders and biorefineries. So you observe some kind of kind of mergers. I wouldn't say mergers. I mean like the
acquisition.
Concentration of the kind of the refining in the hands of the large oil refineries. And this is actually the claim why merchant refineries use the smaller ones. They say, hey, given that all of these larger refineries, they own everything, they're controlling the RIN prices. Essentially, RIN prices small companies are going to be paying is going to be affected by the larger refineries, right? But the thing is, what we observe here in this study, I mean, given that we don't observe any statistically positive effect for the larger companies, I mean, this is actually going to the other side, essentially, to the claim of the larger refineries that, small refineries are protected by the small industry exemption form. Because remember, the small industries, they are not like fully exposed. If they're experiencing any financial hurdle, they can always apply for the small industry exemption form, and they can be kind of exempt from the regulation. So they are also shielded to some extent. So yeah, I mean, I think this is a theoretical question we were trying to motivate in this setup, like how the RFS potentially triggered concentration, right, of these activities. But we haven't yet fully developed that model, so maybe down the road we can add this.
Okay, so I understand that studying merger and acquisition would be a nice way of highlighting winners and losers from this policy, for instance.
Right.
Okay. I mean, okay. So I'm sure there must be a lot of papers about merger and acquisition. And,
oh yeah. From other industries, we have from other industries like pharmaceuticals, the others. So yeah.
Okay. I mean, I was in another session in this conference about oil and gas and ownership structure and things like that. I think it was the first day, at 7 a.m. Here in France. I think there was a presentation about that with people from Frank Weir's team. I mean, maybe it would be interesting. Okay. Anyway, thank you very much for your presentation and your comments. We're going to move on to the last presentation of the day. So, Gaetano.
Yes, good morning. Okay, I show my screen. Okay, I hope to see all. You see my screen?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, yes. I'm going presentation. Okay, nice. Yeah. I hope it is visible, or I have to reduce.
No, it's visible.
No, it's perfect. Okay. Yeah.
This is nice. Okay for you? Perfect. Now I have to avoid this part, but it's I don't know. Okay. Okay. Nice. Good afternoon. I am Gaetano Squadrito from CNR-ITAE in Italy, and I will present oxygen from electrolysis for medical use, an economically feasible rule. This work has been developed in collaboration with my colleagues Agatino, Nicita, and Gaetano Maggio. We work in the Vista group of CNR-ITAE in Messina. Our group is a multidisciplinary group approaching the energy issues. We have in the group both a technical experts and economic and social field experts. So we cover all the aspects of the socio-economic impact of energy technologies. In this presentation, after a short introduction, I will present also a summary of previous supporting works that allow you to better understand the case study approach and the results that we will present. Okay, I don't repeat all the question regarding the green hydrogen because the talk is about oxygen, but we start from hydrogen production, in particular around green hydrogen that is produced from renewable energy sources by using electrolysis. Today, hydrogen production is very largely used in the industry, but it is largely produced from oil, natural gas, and coal. The most cheaper system is natural gas steam reforming that allow to produce green hydrogen. This is not really green because you have also the emission of CO2 that is greenhouse gases that must be avoided. The main issue for the production of green hydrogen is the cost that is considered still too high in front of the efforts that has been made for reducing the cost of the electrolyzer along the field. Okay, we look at another concept. We consider the water electrolysis, and in water electrolysis, for each kilograms of produced hydrogen, we have 8 kilograms of oxygen. But usually, in the analysis for the cost of production of hydrogen, for the production cost of hydrogen, we have not the concept of using oxygen. This is released in the atmosphere. It is not considered a product of the electrolysis. So we approached the problem looking at the opposite side. We look at the oxygen to reduce the cost of hydrogen. This was the first approach that we used, and the results is very surprising. In reality, what we observed, firstly, this was presented in the conference in 2018 in Groningen. The oxygen produced by electrolysis have its own market. It's a very old market that is well developed, both for production and distribution. And a lot of industries use oxygen for their products. And in a special case, there is the medical application that is the object of our talk today. As we've seen in the recent COVID disease emergency, the supply of oxygen is really, really important for some kind of disease. About the market of the oxygen at the world level, the size is about 43.5 billion of dollars in 2019, and it will be expected to reach about 50 billion of dollars in 2025. So it's a very large market with large potentialities for producers. Now we look at our previous work. In the first attempt, we tried to look at the problem from the point of view of small, medium enterprise owners that like to invest in hydrogen technologies. For this reason, we consider the 200 kilowatts photovoltaic plant coupled with the 180 kilowatt electrolyzer. In addition to the standard financial analysis that are carried out for the hydrogen production costs, we have added the compression and storage section. This is expensive. This is really heavy on the capex, and also the energetic cost is not considerable. So we have to consider also this section if we like to sell our hydrogen as compressed gas. These are the parameters that we used in this case, and the results has been published on Journal Hydrogen Energy in 2012. In this work, we considered two hypotheses, both an existing PV plant that is reutilized, is converted to a new use, and the implementation of the whole system since zero. And two different scenarios. The case in which we have the possibility to sell just the hydrogen, and the second case in which we can sell also the oxygen. The result was that just selling oxygen at €2 per kilograms, we are able to reduce strongly the cost of hydrogen compressed at 200 bar. And we chose a price of €2 per kilograms for the oxygen because this is the lower price of technical oxygen for industries in Italy. So using a very low price, we are able to reduce the cost of hydrogen that we produce. Moreover, we have to take into account that technical oxygen is not pure, while from the electrolyzer we have very pure oxygen with very high quality, and really for medical application. We evolved out our works by considering a range of electrolyzers that we can put on. And the range was fixed between 0.1 and 10 megawatts. Also in this case, the focus was the reduction of the price of hydrogen, but with large attention to the oxygen market. So that we considered as reference price for selling hydrogen €10 per kilograms. That is the reference price for refueling station for fuel cell cars. And on this basis, we calculated if we can have a profitability when sell the oxygen. And changed the price of the cell hydrogen between €1 and €7. Also in this case, we considered two scenarios. The case in which we have all the power plant to be built from zero, and the case in which we reutilize a previous existing PV plant. So As you can see, in both cases, when the oxygen price is over €3 per kilograms, we have profitability in less than 20 years. That is the standard life of electrolyzers. So this means that the production of oxygen could be a good way to reduce the price of hydrogen. So we considered the aspect of medical oxygen and extended our work with a specific application to the hospitals. Hospitals, especially in South Mediterranean area, suffer of lack of electricity and lack of oxygen supply in many cases. So for this are really important. Our simulation was centered in our town, Messina, in the northeast corner of Sicily. So we consider this for the sun power that we can use for producing oxygen and hydrogen in the same plant. The electrolyzer is considered to work for about 6 hours every day for all the year by using only the PV roof mounted on the hospital. So we have not connection to the grid. We are in island configuration and all the power coming from the PV roof. Also for the compression system and the storage system, we use the power coming from PV roof. For this reason, the PV roof have a power larger than the consumption of the electrolyzer. Okay, about the need of oxygen from the point of view of the hospital, we used a relation extracted from a paper of Gomez, Chaparro, and other that has been published on sustainability in 2018 regarding Spanish hospitals. The yearly production of oxygen from 1 megawatt electrolyzer was calculated according to the power we have available in Messina City. Okay, for the methodological approach, we used the same approach already used in previous works, and we considered the standard financial parameters for evaluating the profitability of our application. The more expressive is obviously the net present value, and this will be reported in this presentation. We have to take into account that we apply the taxes, like for a small and medium enterprise in Italy, about 50% on the gain, and we have not accounted for loan payments and interest on debt. This means that we supposed that the owner of the hospital have also all the money needed for the capex, the initial capex we need. And at the same time, we don't consider non-cash deduction. This means that we have not the supply of money from our government for this application. Okay, about the details for the calculation of capex and opex, please look at our publication of 2021 on renewable energy. Here there are all the details about the CAPEX and OPEX calculation. Here I report just the main factors. The electrolysis specific cost that is calculated starting from a standard value and arranged according to the power of the electrolyzer. The PV plant specific cost was calculated according to literature reported costs and available costs on the web in Italy. On the right, you have the table with the resuming of the value we used. For the financial parameters, we considered an equity rate of return of 5%, an inflation rate of 1.2%, and a tax rate on earnings of 30%. Moreover, we consider also a system degradation long time of 0.5%. This means that in 20 years, the system will lose 10% of its efficiency and production. Okay, these are the first results. That is really interesting because assuming an hydrogen selling price of just €3 per kilogram, that is the standard price today reported for hydrogen coming from methane stain reforming, with the 1 megawatt electrolyzer plant, we have an oxygen cost of just €3.54 per kilograms to warrant a null net present value after 15 years. This means that after 15 years, we have recovered all the money we have invested and have another 5 years to have a remuneration on the plant. This is very interesting. But we have also to remember that 1 megawatt power plant, in this case 1 megawatt 0.25, needs about 1 hectare of roof, is very large. Okay, in this case we can consider also to reduce the size of the plant to 500 kilowatts. In this case, the oxygen price selling the hydrogen at the same price of €3 per kilogram rises to €4.4 per kilogram. These costs are competitive with the prices of medical oxygen reported by the Italian drug agency that reveals the prices on the market every 6 months. With our prices, we are totally competitive with compressed oxygen gas for medical application, while we are not competitive with cryogenic gas. But you must consider that these prices are without delivering and bottle renting costs. So the vessels are not considered. And also the delivery of the oxygen. Well, we go ahead looking at the different possibility about the hospital. We considered from few beds to 500 beds hospitals, calculating correspondingly the needs of oxygen and also the electrolyzer size. From this calculation, we have that the oxygen consumption, the oxygen cost decrease, increasing the number of beds, obviously because the power plant specific cost decrease, increasing the size of electrolyzer. Now, as you can see from this graph, since 200 beds, this system could be interesting for application, especially for remote hospitals that have some problem in supplying of oxygen. Moreover, if you go over 300 beds, the system becomes really, really interesting for the application in all the hospitals in the Mediterranean. Looking to the graph on the right, you can see that the main contribution to the revenue coming from oxygen avoid the cost from the hospital. So if the hospital don't buy the oxygen from the market, but produce by itself the oxygen by our system, it has a very interesting comeback remunerative payback. Okay. So we consider also that large part of hospitals are public or the ownership is from non-lucrative organization. So in this case, at least in Italy, there is not tax payment. Obviously, if we have not the taxes, the cost both for oxygen is reduced, but this is obvious. What is more interesting is that we consider also to avoid to selling hydrogen. This means we burn the hydrogen is considered a byproduct and not usable for us. Also in this case, the oxygen price is really, really interesting, and we can have a competition with the market, with the standard production system. With the difference, the standard production system consumes energy. In our system, we don't consume energy really, because large part of this energy is stored in the form of hydrogen. So we have very low cost hydrogen ready for use. This is very interesting because allow us to introduce a new system, a polygeneration system for hospital and clinics. In this case, we look at the energy health nexus. In the system that we propose, the rest power is used both to generate electric energy for the hospital and electric energy to produce oxygen and hydrogen. Batteries are support for increasing the opportunities of saving energy. As we showed before, hydrogen is at near zero cost. So the oxygen is supplied to the hospital for its necessity, and the hydrogen can be used as we like, for backup energy, or for cogeneration, or for its services without problem. Because in our cases, hydrogen is competitive also with methane dispatch. So we open the way to a new consideration about the polygeneration. Polygeneration is usually used in energy for considering different form of energy to be produced in the same plant. In our plant, we produce different form of energy, heat and electric energy in particular, and a good. In our case, is oxygen for clinic, but for a small and medium enterprise, could be both oxygen and hydrogen that are useful for the market. Okay, this is all. Our conclusion are that distributed oxygen production in hospital is a suitable and sustainable solution, at least in Sicily and Mediterranean area. But we think that especially in Africa, this could be a really interesting application. If medical oxygen is the reference product from electrolysis, hydrogen is produced at a very low cost, at least in our condition. This means island configuration with PV as a generating unit. The byproduct hydrogen can be used in many ways, and it is competitive with conventional fuels. Finally, we introduced a new concept of polygeneration from renewable energy sources. This polygeneration approach considers the simultaneous production of different forms of energy and useful goods. In our case, oxygen and hydrogen. Thank you for your attention. If you have any question, I'm here for you.
Thank you, Gaetano. Very nice example of a synergy between the energy sector and the health sector. Is there now any question from the audience?
Yeah, maybe for my part. It is not possible in Sicily to be grid connected with the electrolyzer, or did you consider this option in order to even reduce the cost further? Because you took 6 hours a day as the average sunshine duration. Would you consider the capacity factor coming or resulting in that as beneficial for the electrolyzer system? So when we would instead also be connected to the grid, we would have, I guess, maybe lower break-even cost.
Okay, yes, I understand your question. I just go back. Okay, one of the problems that we have, I don't know what is the situation in the rest of Europe, but or from Europe, but in Italy we have a problem. When you are connected to the grid, the energy that you acquire from the grid is charged with the grid taxes. So the cost of energy becomes very, very large and is not useful for reducing the cost of producing the hydrogen. So we considered the highland configuration because it's the most effective for reducing the cost of oxygen. Obviously, if the legislation, the politics in Italy will change and there will be not extra taxes on the cost of energy that is used for electrolyzer, the connection to the grid could be useful. But in this moment, it's more simple to be in island configuration. Moreover, we have some limitation about the PV roof that can be mounted without extra cost and authorization. So also for this reason, it's better to work in island configuration where you have not any kind of limitation, at least in Italy. Obviously, the regulation in Italy is changing, also on the pressure of European Parliament. So in the future, we hope to have a better situation from the point of view of the use of this system. So is a half and half. Is a way to balance. Obviously, if we are able to use the electrolyzer more than 6 hours per day for 10 or 12 hours, the cost of oxygen go down very quickly. So it's really interesting, but in this moment it's not feasible. It's not applicable.
Okay.
Another question? Okay, I have a general question. Maybe you have say already answered, but is the production of oxygen carbon intensive? And if yes, do you think current, let's say next future carbon price will severely increase cost of oxygen?
Yes. If you consider also the carbon price, you have the reduction of the cost both of the oxygen that is produced. But in our purpose was to demonstrate that this system is competitive also without any kind of extra income. Okay. So our system allows to reduce the CO2 emission very strongly, because you have not the CO2 emission for the production of oxygen, you have not the CO2 emission for the distribution of oxygen. So you reduce strongly the CO2 emission related to the oxygen production, but our purpose was to demonstrate that the system worked alone, without any contribution from the government, and without any kind of extra income.
Oh, sure, but I mean, it's like there will, if there will be a carbon price, it will be independent of what the oxygen production sector wants or not, you know. So I guess I don't know. Maybe it will be interesting to look at in the future.
Yes, but in the future we will analyze this. This system is under investigation, but we have under investigation this system, the complete system, from a point of view of energy balance and financial balance. Okay. Because obviously we have to demonstrate that also the system have great advantages for the hospital clinics.
Okay, get it. Well, very interesting indeed.
Okay. I hope to supply you the results in the next future. Next conference. In the next conference, I hope to supply all the results on this system.
Obviously, I look forward to know that then. Okay. Anyway, maybe on this note, I think we can conclude this session, unless there is any comment. Okay, so I think we had a very interesting session. Too bad that we could not reach a larger audience. So we had a presentation on different topic of production of industrial goods. One was that on fuel production under renewable fuel standard, and the other two were more focused on the hydrogen and oxygen markets. I think this, I personally learn a lot of things during it. I think it was the same for you too. So anyway, have a nice rest of the conference, still one day, and I hope to meet you in person one day.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks,
Thank you.
Quentin.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you.